We are reading from the book of Jeremiah this morning in the 8th chapter. And before I read from the book of Jeremiah, I have to preface this with the first lesson I learned in preaching class in seminary way back last century. Dr. Kendall McCabe was my preaching instructor, and he said, as a Christian minister, everything we preach is supposed to be good news. That's what the word gospel literally means, is good news. So everything we preach is supposed to be good news. That does not, however, he said, mean that it is all easy news. And this morning we're going to explore some of the tougher sides of both the Bible and of life. And Jeremiah is probably one of the best places in which to do that. Jeremiah is a book that was written out of the depths of the experience of Israel being conquered by Babylon. The book itself is actually an extended poem, and it is one of the most beautiful books in the Bible. It is also one of the most difficult books in the Bible because it does not shy away from the experience of pain and of hopelessness. And the passage that we're reading this morning is one of those heart-achingly beautiful passages. And it begins, "Joy abandons me. There is no cure for my grief. My heart is sick. Hear the wailing and the cry of distress of my people from every corner of the land. Is God not in Zion? Is our ruler not there anymore?" And God replies, "Why then do you provoke me with your carved images and useless foreign gods? The harvest is past. Summer is ended, and we are not saved. I am devastated, for my people are devastated. I mourn. Terror grips me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of my people not been attended to? Oh, that my head were a spring of water, and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I might weep day and night for the slain of my people." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
We are creatures made for the daylight. Physically, we are. Our eyes have, and I hope I don't get this backwards, our eyes have more cones than rods on our retinas, on the part of our eyes that collect light. And cones are daylight receptors. They are less sensitive. They are more attuned to color. And that's what helps us see in the daytime. Rods are low light receptors. And that's what helps us see in the night. But most of us know pretty clearly that we don't do as well in the nighttime. My little toe knows I don't do as well in the nighttime. But we're just not made to see in the dark. There are some animals that are. There are some bats who don't have any cones in their eyes. They only have rods so that they can see that well in the dark. We can't. And now, theologically, we've kind of taken that same bent. We don't like looking at the dark. We don't see well in the dark. And when life gets dark, we quickly get lost. And so as a culture, and unfortunately too many times as Christians, we like to rush ourselves through the dark and get back to the light as quick as we can. We don't like to talk about, to dwell on things that are too heavy. that are depressing. We've learned about the 5 stages of grief. That you begin with denial, and then there's anger, and then there's bargaining, and then there's depression, and then there's acceptance. And we like to think of that as a straight line, as a linear progression, and let's get through the first 4 as fast as we possibly can and get back to acceptance. Most workplaces give us maybe a couple of days if we lose someone we love, and then we're supposed to be back to normal. We're supposed to be back to work. Unfortunately, my experience with grief is that while there are those 5 stages, it's not that denial leads directly to anger, which leads directly to bargaining, which leads directly to depression, which leads to acceptance, and then you're done with it. It's a lot more like a pinball machine, and those are bumpers around the line, and you never quite know when a flipper's going to go off and throw you right back into it again. I don't think we ever completely get done with the loss of a loved one. That we might not have thought of it for years, but then suddenly the flipper goes off and we're bouncing around those bumpers again. And it's as real 10 years later as it was the day after their death. My dad was also a Methodist preacher, and he died, I guess it's going to be 14 years ago next month. And, it's one thing for those of us who are in fields like ministry, or I know a number of people who are counselors and that, we're real good about telling other people, helping other people through those kinds of processes. But when it's your own process, it's a whole different experience. My dad was not well. He had some kind of mass in his lungs that caused him to cough pretty regularly. And the morning that he died, his coughing ruptured something, and he was gone in just a few minutes. And so there wasn't really any time to gather around and say goodbye. But as we did gather around to plan the funeral and such, my mom gave me the only preaching robe my dad ever had. In the little churches in North Dakota that he served when he started out ministry, that just wasn't required. When they finally appointed him to a pretty good-sized church, he had to run right out and get a robe because they expected the preacher to show up in a robe. And that was in 1967, and that was the only robe he ever purchased. And when Mom gave me that robe after Dad's death, it showed a good bit of wear. That it was the only one that he'd ever worn. Yet, even hanging on the hanger, it still kind of had the curve of his shoulders, And I didn't plan this as a way of working through grief or anything. It's just what I do as an artist. I took that robe and I hung it up in my studio. And for the next 10 months, that robe became the muse, the focus of the work that I did. And this painting is one of a series of probably 20 paintings and drawings that came out of that period. That I didn't plan on it, but I discovered that the creative work that I was doing was affecting me in ways that words just weren't able to. The title of the painting is "Take Thou Authority." Those are the words that the bishop says to us when hands are laid upon our head and we are ordained into ministry in the United Methodist Church. Take thou authority. And so for me, spending time with Dad's preaching robe was a way to live in his presence, even though he was now gone, was to enter into that experience of his loss in ways that I still wasn't entirely ready for. I mean, it was always easy when something confusing came up in dealing with a church. I could call Dad, and he wouldn't tell me what to do, but he'd give me some piece of wisdom, and knowing that I couldn't do that anymore. But I realized that, we lose something when we rush past the experience of grief. We deny ourselves the depths of our humanity when we try to numb ourselves to that journey that we go through. And that in lots of ways, the different kinds of arts really invite us to discover what it means to be truly human, even in those inexpressibly painful times. I think most of you here know who Eric Clapton is, the guitarist and musician. And he's not had necessarily an easy life. But he went through an experience that as a parent I can't hardly even imagine. Because he was going to pick up his 4-year-old son Connor from a friend's place in New York City. And as he walked into their 53rd story apartment in New York City to pick up his son, he was met with a wall of tears and faces that were just aghast. And he discovered that an inexpressibly horrible accident had just occurred. And an accident, not the kind of thing where somebody is liable, not the kind of thing where somebody was doing something wrong, just an accident. And the accident was that his 4-year-old son had fallen out of that 53rd story window. I can't imagine how you begin to deal with that. But Mr. Clapton is a musician. And in subsequent interviews, he talks about this song that began living in his head and in his being. And there just didn't seem to be a time to get it out of him and into the world until he was asked to score a movie. And then the song that was about the loss of his son took on some other meaning because of the story of the movie itself. I didn't know anything about the movie. The first time I heard the song was when Clapton was on that Unplugged show. And he began to sing this song. And they're words that resonated with anybody who has gone through deep loss. Would you know my name if I saw you in heaven? Would it be the same if I saw you in heaven? I must be strong and carry on because I know I don't belong here in heaven. Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stand if I saw you in heaven? I'll find my way through night and day because I know I just can't stay here in heaven. Time can bring you down. Time can bend your knees. Time can break your heart. Have you begging please? Begging please. Beyond the door there's peace, I'm sure. And I know there'll be no more tears in heaven. That's why the book of Jeremiah is a poem. It is a work of art that came up from the broken hearts of the people of Israel. Yes, there was a political conquest that kind of initiated all of those events. Babylon came in and defeated Israel as a nation. But it was more than a political event because, you see, the people of Israel had been steeped in these promises from God. The promise that a descendant of David would always sit on the throne in Jerusalem. That God's home was there in Zion, in the heart of the temple. and that none would ever displace them. And so when Babylon marched in, broke down the walls of Jerusalem, marched up the main street of the city and leveled the temple, they destroyed more than buildings. They destroyed the people's idea of who they were and who God was. And they began to ask these existential questions. Where is God in the midst of this? Doesn't God care how bad we are hurting? Is there no balm, no healing salve for the pain that we feel? Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no doctor for the pain that we feel? It is human to feel the pain of loss and grief. And yet there is something that connects us beyond that. There is something reaching out to us when we are lost in the depths of darkness. One of my clergy colleagues lost his father right at annual conference time. You know, that annual meeting when we all get together. And he went and dealt with all of those issues that you have to deal with. But he came back for one of our worship services. We worship at least once a day in annual conference. And he stood in the back. And we all got up to sing one of the hymns that we always sing at annual conference. And are we yet alive and see each other's face? And he wasn't singing. He was crying a little bit. And he told another one of our colleagues, it wasn't said directly to me, but I was there to hear it. He said, you know, I just can't sing right now. But I'm glad that you all are here to sing for me until I can sing again. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician for the pain that we feel? Sometimes we rush too quickly to an easy answer. When the best that we can do is to let others sing for us until we're ready to sing again. And that I think it is one of the expressions of Christ's healing love that we can sing. That we can sing for each other until we're all ready to join in the chorus again. The good news is not always easy news. I don't know whether it's good news that I think each one of us is going to experience some kind of pain and darkness in the span of our lives. That's just a human truth. But the good news is that we don't have to get through it on our own. We are given the capacity and the ability to make art out of our pain. And art is always a communal experience. And because we are together followers of Christ, we can take that artful heart and keep singing through the darkness until we're all ready to sing together again. It was African Americans who, out of the experience of slavery, took that question from Jeremiah Is there no balm in Gilead? And because of their experience of Jesus Christ, they sang it a different way. And I invite you to turn to number 375. We're changing what the bulletin says here just a little bit, but number 375. Let us join their voices. Let us stand as we're able and sing together. There is a balm in Gilead.